6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the Monday, June 6th, 2022, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. Before we begin, if you, like any other meeting, if you take a second and please silence your phones. And once you do that, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Okay. Mr. Hatfield, please take roll.
Absolutely. President McFarland.
Here.
Vice President Roush.
Here.
Secretary Hatfield is here. Treasurer Lauterbach.
Here.
Member Baker.
Here.
Member Blasey. Member Frazee. All accounted for except for Member Blasey and Member Frazee.
Okay, we have a quorum. That'll take us to item 2, the consent agenda. That includes item 2.1, approval of the minutes of May 16, 2022, regular meeting. Item 2.2 is approval of the payment of the school system's bills. The amount there is listed in the agenda. And that is it for the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I support.
Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Hatfield. Any additional discussion on items 2.1 or 2.2? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Item 3, presentations to the board. Item 3.1. This is the Midland High A.H. Nicholas Innovation Competition Team. Mr. Fox. Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bob Fox. I teach computer science and math at Midland High School, and I am also the advisor for our school's A.H. Nicholas Innovation Award teams. Midland High has actually won this competition for 4 years in a row now, but this year's team was so impressive, and I was so proud of them that I asked them to come and share a little bit of the work that they've been doing for not just the last school year, but really the last calendar year. This idea started back in, what was it, May of last year? So I know you're not here to see me, you want to see them, so I'll introduce them. Unfortunately, one of the team members, Allie Sheffer, couldn't be here tonight, but I do have team leader Lauren McGurk and lead developer Eliana Wren.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Mr. Fox. As he said, my name is Lauren and this is Eliana. And sadly, Allie's not with us, but let's get on with the presentation. So, I'll let Eliana go first.
The A.H. Nicholas Innovation Competition is a competition designed to inspire innovators, challenge students to work in team environments, attempt to solve world problems, allow the students to learn about creative marketing and financing elements to the business plan, and gain real-world experience.
At the A.H. Nicholas Innovation Competition, we were able to receive first place, which gave each of us a $5,000 scholarship. The school received a $20,000 STEM grant, and we also got a traveling trophy with our engraved names on it, and the school gets to keep a first place plaque with our engraved names on it. So far, part of the STEM grant has already been used for the welding program at Midland High to help buy practice medals for the remainder of the school year when it was purchased. Our app that we created is called Virtual Motion Therapy, and Virtual Motion Therapy is a virtual reality app that is meant for Parkinson's patients to serve as an at-home form of physical therapy. The remainder of our presentation will consist of what we would have presented to the judges at the A.H. Nicholas Innovation Competition. In October of 2017, my grandpa was sent to the hospital after having some very serious health issues. The doctor struggled to pinpoint what exactly was wrong with him. Several months after he was sent to the hospital the first time, he was finally diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Shortly after, he had to go live in a nursing home. While he was in the nursing home, we watched his symptoms progress very quickly. From tremors and slurred speech, he quickly lost motivation. And soon enough, he was unable to walk or even speak on his own. Unfortunately, about 3 years later after his original diagnosis, on July 4th of 2020, he passed away.
Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder, which means that it worsens over time. It can cause uncontrolled movements, such as tremors, and over 10 million are diagnosed per year, which includes 60,000 Americans. Current treatment options available for Parkinson's includes dopamine promoter medication, but because of the ongoing treatment that is needed, this becomes costly over time. Another option is brain stimulation therapy, but this surgery is invasive, expensive, and does not guarantee results. Lastly, physical therapy is the most common treatment option for Parkinson's, which includes the LSVT BIG program. But lack of motivation and the expensiveness of this treatment are big obstacles.
As Eliana mentioned, physical therapy is extremely expensive. The cost of one physical therapy session for around an hour can vary between $50 and $150 depending on the insurance plan. The LSVT BIG program is a 4-week program where the patient goes into the clinic 3 times a week for a 1-hour session. Now this costs between $600 and $1,800. That is expensive for just a 4-week program. And then the other challenge that Eliana mentioned is the patient struggles to have motivation to continue their exercises on their own at home. So virtual motion therapy's purpose is to help patients diagnosed with Parkinson's disease have access to gamified physical therapy while making it affordable for everyone. The first key design objective we considered while developing our app was including research-based intervention. We used a variety of online references and talked to local experts. Some experts we included were physical therapists who were certified in treating patients with Parkinson's disease, who advised us on what exercises we should include and what movements we should have in our app. We also talked to a neurosurgeon and a neurological researcher who advised us on what safety measures we should be sure to take to ensure the safety of our patients.
One of the main features we wanted to focus on was accessibility. We wanted to make sure that the patient will be able to use this at home and have it be easily transferable between the clinic and the home. We also made it affordable so that way they can have easier access to this treatment, as accessibility is a major obstacle.
Another key design objective we considered while developing our app was ensuring that it was gamified. By having the app be gamified, it is more fun and entertaining. It is also more motivating for the patient, and the patient is then more likely to complete their exercises. A part of having it be gamified, we wanted to make sure we included a score system. This allows the patient to try to continue to improve their score, which further improves their motivation.
One of the last features we focused on was safety. VMT is controller-free, which makes it easier for the patient to use and allows them to have full range of motion of their hands. The patient will be sitting when using VMT, which allows the decreased risk of them falling or hurting themselves. And lastly, a tutorial of how to use the Oculus and the app itself will be taught in clinic when they go to pick up their materials. Objects such as tomatoes and other fun objects in the scene can be picked up and ripped apart. Other objects like mallets can be used to smash these items in the scene. Here you can see a large sphere being thrown at a wall made of blocks. This mimics the arm extension movements that can be used in the LSVT BIG program. In the original version of our app, spheres are thrown at a target to gain points through the scoring system. The different colored spheres indicate which hand to use so that the user uses both of them.
A major component of the A.H. Nicholas Innovation Competition is developing a business plan so that you can effectively market your product. In our business plan, we decided to create 3 different levels of how we would go about receiving funding so that we can fully develop our app. The first is by going through some sort of vertical merger where we would be absorbed into a larger company. This would connect us to not only the monetary resources, but also a lot of intelligence that we wouldn't have ourselves to be able to fully develop our app. Another option is to find an investor who would give us the monetary resources that would allow us to fully develop our app and be able to have us pay for the resources that we would need to have our app be as successful as possible. In the scenario that a vertical merger or finding an investor doesn't work with virtual motion therapy, we still plan to fundraise because we believe that this app really can change the world, so we need to do something about that. Here you can see a cost chart of what a physical therapist or a clinic would be paying for our product. They would buy the Oculus independently of us from the Oculus website, and then we would charge them a $50 monthly licensing fee for VMT. You can see here, if a clinic were to buy 5 headsets, this would be about $250 for their monthly fee, and it would be $3,000 a year. Then we would leave the pricing for the patients up to the physical therapist to decide.
For the VMT 5-month plan, our first steps would be to fine-tune the initial app, which includes solving any technical issues that might be problematic for the Parkinson's patients. We'd also like to market towards physical therapists so that way we can better develop the app. For the 8-month plan, we would like to start by adding additional game modes, which includes a standing option so that the patient would be able to increase their lower body coordination. We would like to offer in-app communication so that clinicians can better keep track of their patients' progress, market towards clinics and hospitals, and finally, develop more closely with physical therapists.
So we've fully developed our app, and we've won the A.H. Nicholas competition, so now what do? We've started off by reaching out to some Parkinson's foundations, including the Kirk Gibson Foundation, as well as the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Now, these are very famous people who we might not be connected with, so we've also looked at some different businesses that would be interested in an idea, such as Hinge Health. This is a company that is looking at developing new ways of physical therapy for at home. We can set up a meeting with them, which we have access to, and hopefully share our idea to be able to make this a real thing. We want to thank you so much for the time and allowing us to present and open the floor for some questions.
Yeah, wow.
So this was the three of you working on this, along with your teacher?
Yeah, so the three of us have been working on it since May of 2021.
Wow, great job.
How did you end up securing your funding?
So as a part of the competition, there are two phases. The first phase, you enter an abstract of your idea. So we gave just the general, here's the issue, Parkinson's disease is a problem and treatment is hard to find because it's a chronic condition. And this is a way we can go about solving it, of having some sort of virtual physical therapy for them. And so by submitting that abstract, then 20 teams are selected to move on to phase 2, which we were selected, and then we received a $1,000 grant to develop our app. And so we used this money for an Oculus headset. We bought a VIRF hand tracking system, which is how we can have the controller free. And did we buy something else? I think that was basically it, but then we had that money to use to develop our app.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what your school day looks like? How much of what you presented to us today was done in class versus outside of class and after school?
Yeah, so we each had it, all three of us were in an independent study to work on this, which was really beneficial to allow us the full amount of time that should be committed to develop a project like this. And I think that's ultimately what brought us to the success of having first place at this competition, of having the time in the school day. So 2 of us had it during the same hour, and then 1 had it the hour prior. And we would work on it at lunch together. So the majority was done during the school day, and then we also would practice presenting our presentation outside of school for a couple hours, especially the week leading up to the presentation. And a lot of the stuff did have to be done at school because of the system that we were working on, because a lot of us didn't have Unity at home. Well, specifically Eliana, who developed the app.
So I think this is fascinating. I've got so many questions. Who has, and maybe Mr. Fox could answer this more, who's got the royalty rights to this? Let's say this thing takes off and is living and breathing for the next 20 years. You guys will be long gone. Where does it go? Who maintains it? How does it continue to develop?
Sure.
So the A.H. Nicholas Foundation, they provide resources to help you protect your intellectual property. So should they choose to do that, they do have access to some opportunities. And I'm certainly not a patent lawyer or a copyright lawyer, but those resources do exist for them if they choose to take advantage of them.
And the scholarships that you won, are those for college? What are those for?
Yeah, so we put in our college schedule, and they get sent straight to our school. Yeah.
And how did you decide on where the $20,000 STEM scholarship went?
I believe that's pretty much up to Mr. Fox. Yep, back to you.
Yeah, so as we've won it over the years, the money has been collected at the school in a club account, and so as needs arise, then we give the money away. So for example, a lot of the equipment in the new chemistry labs at Midland High School came from that funding. We've purchased graphing calculators in the past. The math department uses a tool called Delta Math, and so the licensing fee for that every year comes from the Nicholas money. As Lauren mentioned, some things have been purchased for the welding department, and so it's as needs arise, and it's been very helpful. It was helpful to me as a computer science teacher because I was able to use some of it to be able to deliver online instruction during COVID, which is incredibly hard to do in computer science when you can't be there and the kids have Chromebooks, not PCs. So we've used it for a variety of things.
Have you heard back from any of the foundations?
None of the foundations yet, but we're working on setting up a meeting with Hinge Health right now, who I have connections with through my brother-in-law, who is a software engineer.
I might be able to help you just a little bit with the Gibson Foundation.
I heard you were a fan.
I would just like to say congratulations to all of you, and this is just amazing, and I wish you all the best, and for the whole therapy program. I think all of us know people or have family that deal with Parkinson's, and it is devastating. So to be able to add something like this into their lives, I just think it's incredible. So thank you, and
Yes.
good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right. That's a tough act to follow, Mike.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, next up is item 3.2. This is an action item. This is the annual renewal and review of superintendent's contract. And this is something that we do every year. And rather than go through your accolades, Mike, we've done that over the years kind of ad nauseum. I mean, we know how impressive you are and what you bring to the district. I am going to just kind of go through the agreement for superintendent of schools. I have given you all a copy, a strike-through copy, so we can discuss the changes briefly, after which I will accept the motion to approve the new contract. So the changes are as follows. First is going to be under paragraph 1, the term. The term of the contract is going to be 3 years. Last year, as you recall, the contract went from 5 years to 4 years, and now it's going to continue to reduce by 1 year. The proposed term is going to run from July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. Next is paragraph 5. This is compensation. As you know, Mike has always been at the low end of the compensation scale when compared to his peers in the Great Lakes Bay region and similarly performing districts that MPS is measured against across the state. This has always been by Mike's choice. He's always agreed to accept a lesser amount, and he's always agreed to accept nothing more than a salary increase that is commensurate and in line with those received by the rest of his administrative cabinet. This year is no exception. And so his proposed increase will bring his current salary of $183,138.72 to $194,342.01. Just to highlight this a little bit, there are really 13 districts that MPS is measured against across the state. Some of those superintendents, Meridian, for example, locally, as of 2021-22, so this is not including any raise they may have received from their board, the Meridian superintendent is at $185,556 a year with a $5,000 annuity and a $16,400 health care cost. Mike does not have health insurance, so there's no cost to us for that. Utica Public Schools, superintendent, $203,970. Rockford, $270,042. Forest Hills, $207,729. So even with this proposed pay increase, Mike will still be squarely in the bottom quartile of his peers, and he's okay with that. So moving on, we are going to paragraph 6. This is retirement and deferred comp. There's a nominal change here. The proposal is to increase the annual contribution from 6.5% to 6.7%. Professional dues, Mike has has a proposed change from 2,000 to 2,200. And finally, paragraph 14, professional dues, by the way, is paragraph 13. Paragraph 14, professional growth. The proposed change is to increase the amount from $2,500 to a whopping $2,600, noting that the funds are only used as they're expended. Anything beyond that amount comes out of Mr. Sherrill's pocket. So in light of all that, my recommendation is to adopt the contract as written, but I will accept a motion to that end at this time.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Roush. Any additional discussion regarding Mike's proposed contract renewal? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
And thank you. It's always my privilege to serve you. So, has been since Jerry's in the crowd somewhere, that he brought me in 9 years ago. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next up, item 3.3, Mr. Bruton. This is information only.
Yeah, thank you, President McFarland. Board, it is my privilege to present to you this evening our proposed 22-23 operating budget. As you just mentioned, this is for information only. We do not take official action on the budget this evening. Megan, can you fix this for me while I'm introducing that out there? I'd appreciate that. Thank you. The action for this budget, as you'll see on the next slide when we're fixing the remote control there, will come at the June 20th Board of Education meeting. At that meeting, thank you, Penny, appreciate that. There we go. At that meeting, we will bring to you a revised 21-22 budget and also bring to you this budget that I'm presenting this evening for official action. So we'll get right into some of the details, and I regretfully have to give you the disclaimers that seems to be the trend these past couple of years. The state of Michigan has not yet finalized their fiscal year 23 budget. We do now have a better picture than what we did in April. We have seen an executive, we've seen a House, we've seen a Senate, and all of them look to be favorable, some in more ways than others. And so what you're seeing this evening really is our best conservative guess. We didn't go toward the high end, we kind of went toward the middle of the road, hoping that our estimates come in a little bit lower than what actually comes to us with the actual fiscal year when it comes through. I also want to throw another disclaimer out that our ESSER plans, which we presented to you in detail a couple of meetings back, we fully anticipate that we will need to make amendments to those plans as staffing progresses, as the needs of students evolve. And so what we've built into the budget is based on the plans that we presented to you a couple of meetings back, but we fully do anticipate that there will be some substantive changes to that as the evolution of the needs of students progresses. So those are our official disclaimers. The numbers that we're showing to you tonight, when I get to a couple of slides, they're really only good for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, when we bring to you the 21-22 amended budget, that'll change the bottom line on fund balances. And 2 weeks later, once we have our audit done, they'll change yet again. So this is simply a snapshot in time, but it does again present to you what we think our best estimates are. And so, we also present to you this evening as a part of this our truth in taxation and the millage rates that we are proposing that will support the revenues necessary for us to claim our full operating revenues. 18 mills is standard on all non-homestead properties and has been that way for a long time. I do want to spend a little bit of time on our hold harmless millage. If you remember the September Board of Education meeting, we had a very, very substantial overhaul to the law that came through the legislature last year that reduced the amount of hold harmless millage rate that we need to ask our citizens to provide us. For reference, last year when I sat at this table, I was asking for our citizens to support a hold harmless millage that was about 1.24 mils higher than you're seeing the rate that we're asking this year. That's because the government changed our ability to collect. It was $415 and change, and now is $122. And so the millage that we're going to be asking the taxpayers to support is 0.4782 mils versus rates that were typically in the 1.6s and 1.7s historically. With a footnote that if the legislature throws us another curveball on that, we'll come back to you again with changes if need be. But we think that that rate is probably going to hold right in that range. And of course, our school building and site bonds, 2.95 mils, It has been that rate since the beginning, and our financial advisors from PFM who do some calculations for us on that end suggest that we collect the same 2.95 mils on our school building and site bonds. Your millage rates come to you for approval in two different packages. Tonight, we'll ask you to approve the city's millages, which take those rates and cut them in half because we do a summer collection and also a winter. And then at the July Board of Education meeting, there'll be another series of tax proposals that come to you that are these numbers, but it's for other taxing jurisdictions as well. So you hear me talk about that at the next meeting and also the July meeting as well, all reflecting these exact same rates. So now on to our predictions. This is for the revenue side of our fiscal year 23 budget. We are predicting our state aid foundation to come in at $400 additional per pupil. We are currently at $87.58, so we are guessing it's going to be around $91.58. Most of our peers and colleagues are building their budgets at $435. As I said, we're coming in a little bit more conservative just to try and be safe. We're actually hoping based on the Consumer Revenue Estimating Conference that's coming up soon, we hear that there's an increase in revenues at the state level. It could even come in higher than that. We're not sure. Once we do know for sure, then of course when we do our next budget amendment, we'll tell you there. We talked about hold harmless, so no need to talk about that further. And enrollment, our conservative estimate from both our consultant and our internal estimates is we are predicting a drop of around 55 students from where our blended count is this year. Our trends look to be beating that a little bit, but again, we're building you a conservative budget, so we wanted to go in safe to make sure that we are not overshooting or undershooting that number. So that's where our revenue per pupil allotment is built. Enrollment, we talked a lot about this in the last presentation, so we don't really need to get there, but I did want to include this because Mr. Shiro did let you know that enrollment is stabilizing, and when you see our trend line superimposed next year, based on where it is this year, you see that that stabilization line is in there. I talked a lot about us bringing you these numbers as estimates, and this slide really builds out for you if our foundation allowance really does truly come in at $400 up or $9,158, the makeup of that foundation and how much our local taxpayers would be funding versus what the state is. I do want to spend just a second to go a little deeper on this slide. There's one area that has shifted pretty substantially over the past 2 years in terms of rates, and that would be the percentage of funding provided by our local taxpayers versus the percentage of funding that's provided by the state. That's directly related to the hold harmless millage and the state funding that difference versus what our taxpayers used to. So where the state was typically funding somewhere around 65 to 66% of the foundation, now that's right around 70% because of that gap that's there. So there's less of a burden on our local taxpayers to make up the full foundation than there has been in the past. Of course, this slide will change when the actual foundation comes in, and these numbers will tweak themselves just a little bit slightly. Other major revenue assumptions that we have, ESSER $3, as I said, we're building this budget according to what our plans were that we presented to you a couple of meetings ago. Right above $4.3 million is what we have on paper to be spending next year on ESSER 3. It seems a little high, but that's because of the Northeast HVAC project, which is one big lump sum of money that's going to be happening all during that fiscal year. So that's roughly $850,000 with a bit of contingency built in. The rest is according to those other salaries and benefits for the supports that we have for students. It's really difficult for us to predict grant funding levels. We build our federal grants, our Title 1A, 2A, 4A, all at 85% of what we had the previous year. That's the way the formula typically goes. And 31A, I've talked a lot about this and how this is one hope that we have for the budget to bring full 31A funding to Midland Public Schools. We only saw that in just the governor's budget, so we did not want to count those chips before they're cashed. And we built our 31A funding levels at where they are now, not at what the full allotment would be, hoping that it does come through somehow in the state budget, and then we can make an adjustment accordingly at that time. It's rare that I tell you that I'm building my retirement offsets at the same levels. Typically, I build those at increases every year, but we've seen a lot of interest from our legislators to dump some money into the retirement system to help offset some of the liabilities. And so we're building our retirement offsets and also the increases all at flat for next year. We're pretty certain that it might not jump on us as it has in the past. In terms of revenues, we are bringing to you a budget that we're predicting right around $94.5 million. This is about $1.86 million higher than what you saw from me in the March 22 budget adjustment. In terms of this historic graph, this looks very similar to last year. In a couple of years, the only major change that you're going to see is that federal number of 6.4% is going to shrink. It's higher than it has historically been, but that's because of the ESSER funds that have been coming in. So we'll switch gears to the expenditure side and the assumptions that we have. We have continued to use what we call our Build Our Budget, or BOB process, because Mr. Cooper invented that when he was here years ago. And that's where we meet with every single department and every single building individually. We start in February and we review their expenditures and what their requests are. It's a zero-based budgeting system. We have a guaranteed minimum level of funding, and then they bring to us their requests of what they need and what they would like for the next year. And then we put that entire picture together and meet with our administrative team to see what of those requests we believe that we can fund. Those requests are about 9% over where we were this year, but do remember of note, this also includes our operations budget. And when you're building increases for fuel prices, natural gas, and every time I drive past the Speedway sign, it almost makes me veer into the next lane. That's why you see some of those increases. But to put that into perspective, you'll see another graph later on. This section, the BOB or the BOB process, is only roughly 15% of our overall operating budget. We are a people business, and 85% of our budget continues to be salaries and benefits, which you see are the very next lines. This budget reflects salary increases for all employees. I'll ask you later this evening in a separate action item to approve our salary letter, which sets those certain levels, step increases, lane movements, and also an increase in medical and vision insurance. This is an unknown. We do not have this rate to us. We will not have this for some time, but this is our estimate based on what we've been hearing from peers across the region and talking with our medical representatives as well too. UAAL is a difficult acronym, but it stands for Unfunded Actuarial Accrued Liability. This is the difference between the system's assets and the pensions that are accrued. There's a cap. The cap traditionally raises every year, and we're building that cap up at about 1.6%, these expenditures. Other assumptions we have: increased level of employer HSA contributions. We distribute that to our employees in two chunks, 2/3 of it in January, 1/3 of it in September. And because of the raise in the cap and some of our contractual obligations, it's going to cost us about $200 more per full family and $100 for a single subscriber. We talked about our federal allocations being at 85%, and our retirement rates, that 29% of payroll weighted average, is exactly what we had built the budget at last year. Staffing is dynamic. It's ongoing. We continue to staff the district for next year right now. And as we make new hires, all of these budget numbers tweak themselves minor to adjust to the salary levels at which we bring employees in at. So in the end, when you are boiling the entire budget down, if you look at the very bottom, the budget that we brought you in March, our amended budget, versus what we're bringing you now, is a difference of about $3 million extra dollars in expenditures from where we are, bringing our total predicted expenditures inching a bit closer toward the $100 million mark. We're going to get there pretty soon, but we're predicting around $99.4 million. In terms of a breakdown of what you see, I'm not going to go through line by line, but you'll see that the biggest substantial impact of this budget is, of course, salaries and benefits, which I said is 85% of our budgets, which is reflected in the employee wages. The other substance of note, which may raise an eyebrow, we are predicting a decrease in supplies of around $730,000. That's largely due to grant funds that we've had in prior years. We've gotten from the Michigan Department of Education early literacy grants. We had the Alden B. Dow Foundation gift us some dollars to bring in some technology. We've expended most of those 35A5 funds. The Alden B. Dow funds are gone, hence the decrease that you see in those supply lines. And so when you break this down by function in our budget, that $99.4 million, if you take a look at the graph and see the percentage of allocation, we we like to highlight that over 3/4, or in this particular circumstance, 77.1% of this budget goes directly to classroom and student supports and instructional supports, as it should, showing where the priority of the district lies. And so when you boil it all down, the bottom line, this slide, I want to go back to what I said at the very beginning, is going to change 2 times on you over the course of the next approximate month. When you look at the bottom at anticipated fund balance, that is based on the March amendment. We're going to bring to you another amendment in 2 weeks, which will change that bottom line. And once the audit is over, it'll change that bottom line once again. And typically, it will change that bottom line to the positive. But again, we present to you conservative estimates so that we are predicting a spot that will likely be better in the future. So with our expected budget variance at 2%, on paper, as we stand right now with these conservative estimates, it looks like a dip into the fund balance of approximately $2.89 million. Again, subject to change based on what we hear from the actual budgets from the legislature coming to us. This slide will be good again for another couple of weeks, and then it's going to change. It shows your fund balance history in terms of percentage and in terms of actual whole dollar amount. We're not going to spend too much time here, again, because it's going to change very rapidly on you. But if all of our predictions hold 100% true, which they won't, because they will change, this budget shows you a full fund balance that would end the fiscal year 23 at approximately 24.4%, again, which is a very conservative estimate. This is a tradition
Brian,
slide.
Let me point something out. Go back to that back slide.
Yes, sir?
This is one of the reasons percentages you have to be careful on, because it's really about how many dollars you have more than percentage. Percentage is the easy way to explain it, but in this case, your percentage changes because your expenditures changed as well. It's not just what you dipped, but it also is the other side of that piece component of it. And
Yeah,
so,
that's an entirely true statement. We could have the exact same dollars, a balanced budget, and you would see a drop in your percentage because your expenditures went up. You're dividing the dollars that you have in your piggy bank versus your expenditures, and if your expenditures are nearing 100 million and they were 94 million, math shows you that your percentage is going to go down. So it is about the amount of dollars that you have to sustain operations, which is what you want a healthy fund balance
how many
for.
dollars you could operate on your fund balance, how many days you can operate. In our case, it's longer than probably almost any district in the state, so.
Yeah. Okay, so our traditional closing slide, this is something that Linda Klein, Bob Cooper's predecessor, put in, and she'd be super mad at me if I took this out, so I continue running this on and the calculation. This is simply a tracker that was started in 1994 when Proposal A came in, and it tracked what our actual foundation allowance was versus the Consumer Price Index, and tracks the difference between the two. And this year is a record, which probably won't surprise you because we had to use a consumer price index indicator of an 8.3% increase, which is at its historic highs. And tracking that, there is a current gap of $3,719 per student gap in between what CPI keeping up with our actual foundation would have been. We use this as a reminder that even though we are grateful for the increases coming, it falls far short of keeping up with simply the rate of the Consumer Price Index over time. And so with that, I will use my next traditional closing. We have got to acknowledge the work of our business office, our buildings, and our departments. This is a 10 to 15-minute presentation that is the culmination of hundreds of hours of work that started back in January. And our business office, buildings, and all department members deserve credit and accolades for being able to put this together. Our budgets coincide with lots of other events. We had our audit open last week with our pre-audit. So on top of the pre-audit, they are putting this budget together, and also we are working diligently to bring you the June 20th amendment as well too. So our business office deserves a great amount of credit for all the work that they do in bringing this budget to you at this point in time. And so with that, I'll entertain any questions that you all have.
We don't anticipate on the June 20 that we'll know the actual state budget. So again, it'll be an adoption that'll have to be amended once we know it's known.
So, not necessarily a question, more of a statement for the public. As we continue to watch budget negotiations, I think it's important to keep, at least for me, what I've been advocating for to our legislators is, one, to make sure that 31A funding follows the student. So those students that are at risk, the funding follows them. For those that don't know, Midland's funded at 35 cents on the dollar compared to other Title I districts. The second thing that I think about is unfunded pension liabilities for the state. And the state has a surplus of funds right now. Hopefully they look at one-time surplus of funds to pay down one-time the unfunded pension liabilities, and it further reduces our ongoing expense obligations, so.
Really good points, Phil. The 31A, when you explain it, where it's even more flawed. So for years, until, ironically, Jerry's here tonight, I'll mention again, Jerry, that we went to battle with our legislators. We didn't get any at-risk funds when the majority of the districts did. There was 34 of us who did not. And when last year, when they equalized funding throughout the state, Jerry and I lobbied hard with Gary Glenn's assistance to get in, and we were at 30 or 33% for a while. They raised it to 35 a year ago. But all but a few districts are now level. There's like 8 of them that are above, a Birmingham or some of those that are still above. And so we are equal to every other district, but they still have not equalized us in at-risk funding. And it's because of those 7 or 8 districts that are out there that still are out of formula, but we're not out of formula. So we need to really harp on our legislators on that. Yep.
Great points. Any other questions for Brian? Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll bring us to item 3.4. This is, I'm going to open the floor now for a public hearing regarding what we just talked about with the general operating budget. If anybody would like to come up and address the board. Sorry?
No, this is just on the budget, not the regular public.
Yeah, this is just, this, and again, this is just for, specific to the budget. Next up will be the request to address the board. So that said, anybody in the audience wish to come up and talk about the operating budget? It's really exciting. Mr. Wasserman, the floor is yours.
I'm Jerry Wasserman, Foxwood Drive, now a citizen, used to sit at your table. It's funny to listen to this because I think I had a deja vu moment. You still don't know what the state's going to give you. The state's still underfunding their pensions. The one nice thing is we did start getting follow the student, not follow the district funding for at-risk kids. One thing that's significantly different, congratulations for all the hard work that went on for years and years, is the fund balance. That's very nice to see, not living on the edge of the cliff, worrying about what's going to happen every dollar the state may or may not give you. My urgency to talk to you as a board members is don't squander that. Things will change. The predecessors in front of us didn't see the thing coming. Who knows what's going to come? You don't know what's going to come. Hang on to that because I think there's going to be rougher times ahead than easier times ahead financially in this state in the next 3 to 4 years. With all the inflation, I lived that movie in the 70s, so I know what that's going to do to you, and also any type of recessionary activity on the state. So I'm up here to say, hang on to that rainy day money because the clouds are forming. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Joe Bonides, I just have a quick question about some budgetary conversations earlier, which was too detailed for this. There was discussion about buying an electric bus, and Mr. Blasey had asked a bunch of questions about, does anybody else in the state ever have one? Could you charge the thing? Is it ridiculously expensive? And there were never any follow-ups to that question. I was just wondering if the electric bus was still in the budget or if that just withered away and went away.
His comment wasn't about, was it in the budget? His comment was about electric buses in total, which there's a grant out there available to school districts, but we do not qualify for that grant. So they're targeting lower impoverished communities, Flint, Saginaw, Detroit, some of those with early grants on that. So it's a matching grant to get the electric buses. Do I think it's coming? Probably I do. And so we began to look at it, but ironically, we switched to our last purchase from diesel buses to gasoline buses. Maybe it's worked out well.
Just to be clear, that wasn't a specific discussion about Midland Public Schools buying an electric
Right.
bus. It was generally.
It was in general. He was
Is this where the industry, the bus industry is going?
He was wanting to make sure we had the electrical power out back to charge and those type of things as well. And I think he had read about the grant, and so it was in general, I think, about that. We're not eligible for the grant yet. The buses are coming, and you're starting to see them a few here and there, but very few in the school bus industry yet. More in the other busing industries that occur. But I think it's coming. I mean, we all know that, right? It'll be interesting infrastructure-wise, charging time, all those pieces of it, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on. Item 4, request to address the board. First up on my list, we'll bring Mr. Wasserman back to the podium.
Jerry Wasserman, Foxwood Drive, again, deja vu, I'm talking all the time at a board meeting. I'm here to reflect a little bit on my history on the board, but not for me, for someone else. Went through a lot of tough times that you guys have gone through the last 3 years. You know, we had to shut down schools. I think it's amazing. We've right-sized what you showed in your budget. We seem to be that same student count that we planned for 10 years ago. And there was a person that's not here tonight that normally would here for a board meeting, and she's retiring. And so I have a little gift for our secretary and for Mike's secretary. And she's retiring, she's not here. I will visit her tonight and bring her a thank you on her retirement from former board members and myself. So I will be coming out to visit you tonight, so I hope you're watching. And I'll be there in about, and I will be there in 20 minutes. So that's why I'm here tonight, to honor. So thank you very much for the time at the podium.
Thank you, Jerry.
And as all of us have worked with Cindy, we know what she means to this district. So she has absolutely been a wonderful face. I've been fortunate to have many very, very good office professionals, but they don't get any better than there. So.
All right. Next, Miss Laura, is it Eisler? I-S-E-L-E-R? Laura, are you with us? No? Okay. I have on the list Carla Sherman, but her name is crossed off. Is she with us?
I'm here. It's
Schumann, I'm sorry. Did you want to address the board, ma'am?
Not really, because it's my first time coming here, so I kind of wanted to see what the.
You don't have to be scared. It's okay.
So, but I'll go. I mean, I look on the way to kind of see what the process is, but absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Now I know even though I crossed my name out, it doesn't actually hold. But it's okay, absolutely. So I'm kind of here, I was just kind of wanting to address a little bit more about safety purposes. And it is my first time here, so I don't really know exactly what the whole plan is. I know everyone knows about what's going on. So that was mainly it, in addition to specifically with the safety concerns is when you go in to check out your son, you don't get asked your ID. So your son gets called out from the classroom and he gets handed over to you without any type of identification. So that's one of the concerns I have in regards to, are there processes for that? Is there something that is in, I will be honest, I have not read the student handbook 100%, but I did find that very strange that not only once but twice we were able to go into the school and check out my son without any type of ID. So that's one. The other thing is the safety concerns, as you know, with policing and the student issues that are occurring with mental health and knowing as to what is being done. Specifically, I know the budget's coming. Well, now I know the budget's coming. And how does the district plan to use those funds, in addition to how do we anticipate hiring mental health specialists within the school district to have the availability for the kids to go in and talk to them. I know I heard about at-risk students, but as you know, mental health is not just related to at-risk students. It's a universal issue. Anyone can have a mental health crisis at any time. So I am concerned about that as to what exactly, I come from a school district that has a full-time social worker, a full-time psychologist, and a full-time special education specialist. So that for me coming here was a little different of not having full-time staff, but I understand there's different budgets and things like that. So that's just bringing that to the table. And I do have a minute, so that means I have more time. So specifically also with nurses, that's another area that I am a little bit concerned, is that there's not a registered nurse or assistant nurse in the schools that my children attend. And I know it's not necessarily their job to monitor fevers or things like that, but it is a little bit more, as a parent, it's a little bit more reassuring that when your son gets hit with a bullpen and he gets injured, that I get a call from a nurse, not someone who's not trained in any type of medical injury. He actually had to get 4 stitches in his head because he was hit during PE. And so my concern is not with the staff, is not concerned with the equipment, it's just how it was handled, and not having trained staff available for our kids, for me is very disconcerting, because I did not find out about the issue until I got home from work, and then I had to rush him to the emergency room where he got stitches. He's doing good. His classmates sent him letters and things like that. The principal was fantastic. Everyone was. So I did hear the ring, so I just wanted to bring those things to the attention. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, Mr. Boundides. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
I've got a quick follow-up to the Neola to Thrun bylaw changes previously mentioned in the February board meeting. It was later mentioned that some of these changes would be presented at the board at one of the June meetings after the superintendent reviewed them, something about aligning the practices to the policies, which would be a good change. This was initially presented by the superintendent with support from the 2 lawyers on the board as a way to get a stronger legal defense scenario for the board. So I would like to officially request that when the superintendent presents this to the board, he covers these areas. What changes in the packages supports the improved basic teaching of the students in the district, reading, math, science? And what rights, privileges, or even access changes will result for the public and parents? Will public accountability be negatively impacted? I ask this because there will probably be a bulk switchover of all the bylaws from the old ones to the new ones, and there will not be an opportunity to review them side by side. If there is a change in the public comment from 3 minutes to 1 minute, we would notice. Lastly, I would really like to know if the whole board had an opportunity to even see these changes or the concept, since we've already purchased it, or if this was a subcommittee decision only, or if it was strictly a superintendent decision. Just wondering how much of the education system is really under local control versus the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators, or the Michigan Association of School Boards, or the National School Board Association, who considers parents to be domestic terrorists. And in the interest of not getting myself in trouble for sarcasm, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Buchek. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Melissa Buchek. I'm a mother, volunteer, engineer. And as a parent of a special needs child, I can tell you I get the idea of inclusion and belonging at my core. I also understand affirming, this is based on the previous school board meetings I've attended. I understand affirming differences based on skin color, gender, but accommodating some while putting others off is not the answer. Last month, this room for this meeting was lectured on its use of pronouns. Several students referred to public comment speakers at these board meetings as ignorant. Ignorant in regards to what, though? Sounds like the DEI push is here to shove their idea of inclusion down your throats, and that's my interpretation. It appeared that they coached a bunch of students to come in and walk in and talk about how their colleagues, as one of them referred to him as a colleague, treated them. Not sure what you all heard at the last meeting, but something seemed off to me. Are DEI student leaders being coached? If a student says it, then it must be, is it true then, necessarily? And I get it, I've been a female in a male-dominated field of engineering. The world isn't fair. I had to work harder than my peers through school, and I root for underdogs, and I'm not here to attack individuals. But the DEI push says that equity is the answer to our vulnerable minority students. Some in this district believe that not announcing honor students' names at the MPS end-of-year ceremonies, this happened this year, maybe that shields the vulnerable or something like that. But I see it as taking away from the students that worked hard this year by not acknowledging their names. It deprives them of the encouragement to work hard. We saw two wonderful women come up here and talk about this Oculus program, and I mean, it probably took more than last year to get them to that point. Like, they needed the encouragement. So the focus on working hard for merit needs to come back. But that's not how equity works, I don't think. It seems like it's creating a ceiling for high achievers so that we all feel good when there's equal outcomes. But DeAndre, take note in case you're still looking for a definition for equity. This appears to be what equity, is defined as. Meanwhile, I see in the Communique students celebrated up and down for their extracurricular achievements. So, kudos to that and having them celebrated. I'll just end with my vote for school board coming up in November is going to be based on candidates that support parents that come up here and advocate for their students. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who wasn't on the list? Okay, moving on. Item 5, Finance, Facilities, and Operations. 5.1 is an action item. This is our salary letter, previously alluded to by Mr. Bruton.
Yeah. Thank you, President McFarland. The budget that I just presented to you included the salary rates that are defined for you in the salary letter that was attached to the Board of Education agenda. This 11-page letter sets the salary rates for 14 employee groups. Some are affiliated, some are non-affiliated, as well as some of the residual contractual obligations that are tied to either contractual language or to rates such as CPI, et cetera. And so your approval this evening will allow us to put those rates in place for the 22-23 school year, again, as was presented in the fiscal year 23 informational budget you got this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion to approve the 22-23 salary letter in action item 5.1.
I support.
Motion by Mr. Roush, support by Mr. Hatfield. Any additional discussion regarding item 5.1? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next up, another action item, 5.2. Mr. Bruton?
Yeah, early in the presentation, there was a slide that defined the tax rates to support our fiscal year 23 operating budget. We are asking for your approval of the attached resolution this evening that sets those tax rates simply for the city of Midland, not the other taxing jurisdictions. Within that, you will see that the rates are set at 1/2 of what you saw on that budget slide. So for specificity and to point that out, the rate we are asking for the hold harmless is 0.2391 mils for the summer tax collection. That's 1/2 of the 0.4782 that was shown. We are also asking for 1.475 mils for the bond, which is 1/2 of the 2.95. 9 mils for the hold harmless, which is 1/2 of your 18 mils. And then your commercial personal property is responsible for the 18 mils. They're exempt from the first 12. That gives you 6. You cut that in half. That's the 3 mills that you see there defined. So your approval this evening will allow me to send these rates to our friend Kayla Ripley over at the City of Midland so she can get the summer tax rolls ready, and we would appreciate your approval this evening of the rates.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I will accept the motion for item 5.2.
Make a motion to approve the summer tax rate collection for the city of Midland taxpayers as defined in section 5.2.
Support.
Okay, motion by Mr. Roush, support by Mr. Hatfield. Any additional discussion regarding item 5.2? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, none, motion carries. Thank you. Final action item is item 5.3. Actually, it's not our final one for the evening. We've got one more. This is workers' compensation insurance. Mr. Bruton.
Yep, thank you. We are asking for your approval this evening for a second renewal of our workers' compensation policy with the Yiter Insurance Agency. This renewal rate for 22-23 coverage is as defined in the attached documentation, set at $80,084.
All right.
Approval of item 5.3, the purchase of workers' compensation insurance.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Lynn. Any further discussion regarding item 5.3, workers' comp insurance?
Brian, this is our second renewal, you said, so we typically go out for bid after 3?
3 to 5.
3 to 5, okay.
We're
Thanks.
bidding for, an additional 5 years of coverage?
No, we rebid, we go out for.
We'll rebid it again, okay.
Somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range is when we typically go out and seek a rebid.
Okay, all right. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up is item 6. This is correspondence to and from the board. 6.1 is letters to the Board of Education. Those individuals are listed in item 6.1. Item 7, 6.1 of the agenda for anyone who wants to look. Item 7.1 is a list of our remaining regular and special meetings of the Board of Education. Item 8 is our study session and discussion. Is there anything that we need points of clarification on? Anything we discussed this evening? Okay, we are not done yet. At this time, we will take a motion to move into closed session.
I move to move into closed session.
Yeah, remember, you have to say what it's for.
State the reason.
Oh, I'm sorry, closed session for an update regarding collective bargaining with the Midland City Education Association. I apologize.
And you can go ahead and say, Scott, that you would come out back into open session to actually take action.
Yes, and we will take action on that in open session, if any. Correct.
So the motion's been made. We need a roll call vote.
Yes.
Okay. Roll call. All right. President McFarland?
Yes.
Vice President Roush?
Yes.
Secretary Hatfield? Yes. Treasurer Lauterbach?
Yes.
Member Baker?
Yes.
Okay,
All in favor?
we are in closed session. We are back in session, and that brings us to item number 10. This is an action item, consideration of contract ratification, and we have that up for a vote. I'll take a motion, please.
I move to adopt the contract ratification with the Midland City Education Association.
Support?
Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Roush. Any additional discussion regarding the contract ratification? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. And that will end our formal agenda. Before we close tonight, Mike, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, just, maybe off that last one, I'd give a thanks out to MCA. They were good to work with. Mark, that's a very nice job with that group. And so, again, we settled contracts early and going forward and relatively pain-free. So, very, very good job. Carla, I don't normally address the board directly, but school safety is such a big issue right now that I feel obligated to kind of try to ease your mind as much as you can. This crazy world that I can't guarantee anything in this world. But Carl, a couple things on that part is, so there's a bunch of funding streams that have been opened up by our state and a little bit the federal government flow through. So we do have a number of what we call student support specialists. And there's two different styles of that. 7 or 8 positions in the district. Penny's going to correct me if I misspeak here. 7 or 8 positions in the district, and one is to assist teachers identifying children who are in crisis mentally, and the other one is actually to work one-on-one with a child who is in crisis. So there's been about 8 increases in positions. 3 or 4 are already in place, 3 or 4 currently hired with those dollars going forward. So we'll be fully staffed in fall. So it's chasing psychs and social workers because there's a shortage of them out there. But you mentioned that we didn't have full-time, and I couldn't tell if you were separating, so I don't want to say you were wrong. Okay. We do have full-time psychs and social workers on staff, quite a few. But you're probably right if your intent was that they spend a lot of time in special education, which I thought maybe was where you were going. Yeah. So I wanted to correct that we have them, and they are full-time, but yeah, okay. And then, I can talk about school safety, probably because I have a lot of gray hair and have been around since Columbine. The steps we made, Lynn, that's Scott, one of my original board members since I've been here. When I arrived, it was one of the issues that were hot on my topic because we were behind. I came from southeast Michigan, near close to the Metro Detroit area where we had Sally Port entries and we had video surveillance and we had all of the things trying to harden targets. And you are correct. I think the most important thing is the proactive mental health component of this. But certainly we want to make the bad guy choose somewhere else to go. And so doors secured in our district. Sally Port entries are considered by the safety experts the best mode, not just a ringer at the door. And the reason would be you can get into the office and I can read you. I can read you immediately and see if you're just irritated or if there's really something going on, and I can alert immediately. A buzzer at the door, outside the door, when you're quick, the tendency sometimes after a while is just to buzz the person in. And then they have free access to the hallways. So in our case, yes, Sandy Hook had the same technology, and they took the office staff and they moved on. In our case, they could do that, but then they got to find the buzz and how to release themselves through the door, which they'll eventually find. But the whole concept is slowing him down to get the police presence, which didn't happen in Uvalde, evidently, where our police is trained, they're going in immediately. In our case, we have 4 SROs, very fortunate to have those with your tax dollars to do so. Yes, predominantly at secondary. They do cover the elementaries. Fortunately, a couple of our elementaries are very close to those buildings. The reaction time from our police would be very short. Any drills we've ran have been so. And of course, we use ALICE protocols. We have door boots on most of the doors, not all of them yet, because new doors are being replaced, but I would say we're about 80% of the doors in the district have the boots. We're pretty proactive. I'm not going to tell you it can't happen here, but we're pretty proactive in what is occurring. We're constantly trying to improve. We'll study what happened in Uvalde. We'll study what's happened in some of the recent ones and try to get better at that. But I totally agree with you on if we just kept people mentally healthy, we'd be better off.
You want to cover the ID issue too?
Yeah, the ID issue. So office should check IDs, but I'm going to guess, and not positive, but I've seen it a million times in my 37 years, is office begin to recognize folks. And so they may or may not have recognized you, and maybe hand you over, but we can check into that. And I immediately will look and see where your child goes to school tomorrow, and I will be talking to that office to see what has occurred. But yes, they should identify the person taking them. But after that, once, say that office staff knows who you are, we've also trained them for not to repeatedly ask you for your ID, because that's not very customer friendly either.
Am I allowed to?
We normally don't, but go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just wasn't too sure. But for the sake of the school, we did address that with them. And they
Perfect.
did acknowledge it. The second time was during an event. The first time was not during an event, and this is our first time in that school.
Yep.
So they don't know anyone
Okay.
there. But I just wanted to clarify
Yep.
for the school
Perfect.
itself that we did address it to them first.
Yep.
And they did acknowledge that, but I still think that's
Yeah.
still an issue.
Yeah.
And so the other things I'm sure we have.
Yeah.
We can address the other concerns about mental
You
health.
got it, we will. And we'll be constantly reminding you of some of those things we've done in our communique on that too. We did it once, but we'll do it again to make sure you see what we're trying to do and proactively, so. I see Mr. Benavides is gone, but he's talked about these Truman policies multiple times, so I think I need to address this one too, guys, publicly, so everyone hears it. So for years, and I'm gonna go back a way, but for years, the Michigan Association of School Boards provided a policy service called Aaron, and it wasn't very good. And so the Michigan Association of School Boards eventually worked with other states who had been using Neola. Neola predominantly came out of Ohio. And so they moved into Michigan, and they were the only policy service because Aaron was dropped. So we all adopted Neola policies. And why do you need a policy service? Because you need a bag attorneys trying to keep you up to date with all the MCLs. And if you all have to do is go look at any policy, and Lynn and Scott and some of you have sat through 10 years of this, so you know what I'm talking about. But Michigan's codified law is so sophisticated, you don't adopt policies. You adopt them at your level, but you don't write them. You need a policy service. John, a law attorney, could not write school code policies without a lot of
I
training.
wouldn't try.
Yep.
Because no, I'm serious, because it is very specialized.
Yes.
And a lawyer who doesn't do it shouldn't do it. That's why you have firms like Truman
Yeah.
that know Michigan education law backwards and forwards. That's what they do.
And
that's-
Neola
that's
policy
where
is
we should get that
cumbersome,
expertise.
and so the reason I want to address it from Mr. Benavides, it's so cumbersome, it's difficult for the average citizen to look at a manual. If you print out the Neola manual, it's this big. And so Truman, the largest law firm in the state, not the only, Clark Hill's second largest, there's three of them that predominantly do schools, was bagged by all of the schools, please get in the policy service. So they began to get into it. And they have simplified the policies, easier to be used. And when I saw that, I had talked to our board committees, and actually, I believe John, Scott, who are attorneys, said, we should do this. So the accusation somehow that I drive everything is totally false. And it's amazing, because my boss used to say to me, you get too much credit, too much blame as superintendent, and all the credit that people give me to control this district, I am the greatest puppet master that ever existed, according to them. Because I've got 1,000 employees, 8,000 students, and 17 buildings, and somehow I control everything.
I don't know where where Mr. Bonetti's comment came from, that Scott and I suggested it so we'd have a better defense.
Yeah.
I recall saying,
Correct.
we should have Michigan-specific policies.
That'll
We should
align.
have a Michigan school law firm draft policies that are specific
Yep.
to Michigan law.
Yeah.
And that was
And then
it.
the reading of the policies, and so you're the elected membership that does that work for them. And so your committee goes through all those policies, which is scheduled for Wednesday, I believe, this week. And I go through them ahead of time for you. We bring them in, the committee goes through them, and then it comes to the full board who reads them to be adopted by the full Board of Education for the community. The community can then, we put them on our website, they're there for anyone to look at and analyze going forward. There's nothing magical about school board policies. They're all driven by law. So Truman just simply has a simplified method from Neola. So And they don't restrict. There's no some plan to restrict parent participation in the school district, as all that's got nothing to do with policy, so need to address that. Scott, the other thing, a couple things I'd add is graduation. You know, thank you everyone hanging in there. We really thought when we came up with a rain date that we'd always have graduation at least on one of those dates. Well, we found out that doesn't always work in Michigan, and we had to go back to the gymnasiums, but I want to give credit to our principals. I've heard only can attend one when we do it inside like that both graduations went extremely well, so we thank everyone's patient on that part of it. Bond work and capital improvement work is ongoing. You'll see next door, they're already got a crane over there ready to go, and it's happening throughout the district, much smaller scale than we've seen the last few summers because our dollars are smaller in those areas going forward. You know, last one I will add is pre-primary center. So proud that it's grown from when I got here and we created it from one program to one classroom to two classrooms to now, I think almost 200 students, just underneath that. And we need to take another room, and we probably need to turn the gymnasium back over to them. And so robotics, we found use for our abandoned Jefferson pool that was damaged. If you recall, you know, we've infilled it, we're painting it, and their chest track is going to move over there. A little inconvenient that they'll have to work in their shop over at Carpenter and then go over to the test track, but it's a good solution as we continue to go in pre-primary. So I want you to be aware of that. Robotics has been notified, and we'll all make that work out. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for staying with us tonight.
Move to adjourn.
Support? Okay. All in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned. Good meeting.